Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, I'm hoping you're still there because I had you full shot, lying in your bedroom somewhere, and now you've disappeared. It's rather a relaxing, romantic sight, Kieran, but my laptop's taking you away from me. You're still there. I can hear you chuckling.
Yes, yeah, I can see me and I can see you.
Oh, wow.
So I presume we're both here, and I presume that sound is the BAFTA leaving the room at the degree of amateurish introductions that we bring to the world of podcasts.
Also, that sounds like a dreadful early Bee Gees single from 1965, doesn't it? I can see me and I can see you. Although, let's be fair, dreadful Bee Gees single is a tautology. Kieran, I hate to say this, Kieran, we need to start with an apology to the good people of the Antipodes and Company's House, because we didn't fully appreciate that when we were talking about Auckland the other day, that they actually play in Australia. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, Kieran, we managed to relocate Company's House. I mean, I imagine if the people of Australia and New Zealand I could deal with, but I imagine, Kieran, you'll be getting a cold shoulder from Company's House, wouldn't you?
Yes, I'm very, very sorry. I don't know why I mixed up Cardiff and Swansea. It's not an easy thing to do.
It's not, but sometimes when you love someone so much, Kieran, and you're so comfortable around them, like you are with Company's House, you just, the little details, like, you know, their birthday, the day of your wedding anniversary goes out the window. It's Newsday, Kieran. We're recording this on Tuesday night as we're both working on Wednesday, but there won't be a bigger story than this one coming up. It's been predicted, but Man United are once again spending millions on sacking one manager and bringing another one in. How much is this going to cost them?
That's right. If we take a look at the Manchester United accounts since Sir Alex Ferguson left, between 2013 and the 30th of June 2024, they've spent a grand total of £71 million in compensation for loss of office, which is management speak for sacking people and redundancies. Now, to be fair, a little bit of that has gone to the 250 staff who were sacked. That little bit was, on my calculations, £6.6 million for 250 people. Erik Ten Hag, one person, is getting somewhere in the region of 13 to 15 million pounds. So he's getting twice as much money as the 250 employees who were made redundant by Sonny Jim and the merry people of Ineos. And on top of that, it's going to cost Manchester United, assuming that they will recruit Amorim, it's going to cost them around about a further £6.5 million to trigger his release clause to allow him to come across from Portugal and not have to go and sit through gardening leave. So it's cost Manchester United quite a bit of money. They had to go and pay for Dan Ashworth, be released from the Newcastle gardening leave, and so on. It's one of those organisations which seems to enjoy paying the big bucks for the big things in life, and not necessarily to the same extent for the stuff. Although, you know, we are aware that Manchester United, I think they didn't pay the minimum redundancy payments to give the club some credit for some of the staff that were made redundant. And to give another indication as why they like spending big, the takeover costs for Jim Ratcliffe's involvement in Manchester United, that was £35 million. So that's what, five times as much money as the 250 people they subsequently made redundant have received.
Two big questions off the bat, Kieran. Reading the press of various colours, there's a lot of people claiming that United probably had the chance to get rid of Ten Hag in the summer. Bear in mind, this is a manager who's won 2 trophies for them. But they could have got rid of Ten Hag in the summer and didn't. So it's going to cost them more now. And Tuchel, who everyone seems to think was the number one choice, is no longer available. But secondly, The Athletic in particular are indicating that Man United, You say Amorim is the favourite, but the Athletic in particular are saying that Man United may have to look for a free agent. Would you be able to explain why, firstly, what seems like bad management in the timing of the Ten Hag sacking, but also why would Man United have to look for a free agent, according to one particular journalist?
I think in respect of the decisions which made in the summer, whenever I try to assess a business, if you look at why some businesses do better than others, it always comes down to three elements. It's resources. Manchester United have got, in my view, more resources than 99.9% of professional football clubs. Opportunities. There were opportunities to sign managers in the summer. There were a lot of managers who were between jobs, the likes of Tuchel and so on. And the third issue is the quality of executive decision making. Yeah, and that's why Apple is a success and the Microsoft phone is not. It's simply because one company was better at making decisions than another. Manchester United, and this isn't giving Manchester United senior executives a kicking, because most of them have gone anyway with huge payoffs, appear to have made a series of poor decisions, and they have to take responsibility for that. In terms of the free agent, I'm not really quite sure where the Athletic are coming from there. I guess it could be that they have to be seen to be approaching somebody. I mean, Ruud van Nistelrooy is becoming the interim manager. He could be deemed to be a free agent in the sense that he's not tied to an existing club. So it could be something to do with the nuances of the legal situation there.
It's interesting that you mention Apple, Kieran, because this is going to actually answer my own question in a negative fashion. But it does seem sometimes to an outsider that Man United, because they have those resources, sometimes seems to think, well, we can pay our way out of a bad decision, no matter how much it costs us. And maybe clubs with less money would be more careful with the way they handle it, the way they recruit.
Yeah, if you can't afford to make a mistake, then you tend to take more care to not make a mistake. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from with regards to that observation. Uh, in the case of Manchester United, you would have thought that Van Gaal, Mourinho, David Moyes was a fantastic coach at Everton. He was sacked in less than a year of taking over the Manchester United position. So yeah, whereas other managers have been given a greater amount of time. Um, it's a very, very tough job. If we're old enough to remember Sir Matt Busby,
Yeah.
and then it was what, Frank Farrell, was it Frank Farrelly,
Frank
or
Farrell, yeah, took over, yeah.
and a series of what was considered to be good managers, the likes of Dave Sexton and so on. Manchester United is a tough gig, and you're not just managing players, and you're not just having to manage the. When I teach for the League Managers Association, I always say to the people that are in the room, take a look at your boardroom, and if you've got a choice between clubs, don't choose the best football club, choose the best management team above you, because they're the people that you've got to report to. Though they're the people that will be making decisions, effectively a bit like a Roman emperor, in terms of your future career. And can you trust them? And do you think that they're able to deal with the knockbacks and so on? And at Manchester United, you've not only got that, but you've got the fact that Manchester United is a soap opera. If you take a look at the BBC Sport website, even if Manchester United aren't playing, there'll be 4 or 5 stories about
Yeah,
the club,
yeah.
because it is Manchester United, and United fans have this rather glib saying, hated, adored, but never ignored, and that is the case. Even those fans that loathe Manchester United still observe and are willing to comment upon them at any one point in time.
The trouble is with football as a business, Kieran, is that sometimes we fans are part of the problem, because I was talking to a Man United fan today from Somerset, but that's neither here nor there, but he's also an accountant, so it's 50-50 that he'd be a Man U fan. But my suggestion, I said, what I would do if I owned Man United, I would get Graham Potter in, and I'd give him 3 years, and I'd say if it takes 2 seasons of mid-table before Potter builds something and you win, and the Man United fans said, no, we've got to win something within a year, we've got to win the championship. So it's like, It's not feasible. Whoever comes in isn't going to live up to the expectations of the board or the fans. And you understand why United fans have these high expectations, but they're unreasonable in the same way that some Spurs fans' expectations are unreasonable. But it seems that most management teams at most football clubs are not strong enough to sometimes see beyond the fans and say, look, just for once, trust us to make this decision.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, take a look at Manchester City when I think Pep Guardiola's first season, it wasn't a success as such, and they've done okay since then.
Mm. They've done all right. I haven't really paid much attention to what City. They're all right. They'll be safe this season, won't they?
Yeah, well, they're
Yeah.
never on this show, are they?
Now, Kieran, I've got some advice for you because our next
Oh,
story concerns the fact that the government is now advertising for the role of chair at the new independent football regulator. And my advice, Kieran, as somebody involved in recruitment, is that when you send your application form in, under where it says interests, don't put walking or
or,
spreadsheets
or reading.
or reading. Yeah, come up with something
Yes.
more interesting than
Yeah,
walking and reading because, in my experience, they're the application forms you just go, you've got nothing in your life, have you?
that's
Uh,
right.
so this is. Do we know the fact they're advertising the role of chair, Kieran? Is this for appearance sake? Do you think they know already who they want to have the job, or will there be a proper, thorough, independent application process that will be made public to all as it's going on?
It will be a very, very thorough process. So if you go to the government website, you can see, and we'll get producer guy to put a link if anybody does want to apply for the role. So in terms of the nature of the role, they are looking for somebody from a regulatory background, which I think is absolutely right and proper, rather than a football fan who wants to play with numbers. It's a 3-day a week role, and people saying, "Well, surely that's not enough." Football's a much smaller industry than people realise. So, and they're offering £130,000 a year, and I think those two issues are linked. Um, some people have been a bit sniffy because they say, "Well, hold on, yeah, the average cost of employing somebody in the Premier League is £141,000, and this is only offering 130." But by making it a 3-day a week position, it would allow somebody, A, from a regulatory background, who also has other business interests to apply to make progress as far as the role of chair. Remember, the role of chair is to not necessarily be involved in the day-to-day operational activities of the regulator. So I think that's good news. Um, in terms of the quality of the applicants, I can't say anything really, but some of them are extremely good. You get to hear and see things, and I think it would be very much in self-defense, and also completely independent of politicians. Yeah, the people, these are people who are prepared to stand up to politicians, just as we've seen with the Bank of England and the governor there. So I think that's actually a huge positive. And the cynics, yeah, and here I'm not even going to use the fact, oh yeah, we're not so good. This is the cynics are saying, oh well, it'll be a government appointment and it'll be a government patsy. The government will not get involved and also not want to get involved because the first Die Younger, the first Steve Dale that arises will be a huge challenge for the regulator, and how that is dealt with will be interesting. The other, I think, important issue that happened last week with regards to the regulator was that we did see the first reading of the Labour administration's version of the legislation. And there were some differences. So, first of all, the foreign policy clause, where the regulator had to take into consideration the government's relationship with other countries. And whether that, sort of a broader trading issue had to be taken into consideration. That has been removed, and I think that's right and proper. Secondly, um, ticket prices, there has to be fan consultation with regards to ticket prices. Now, what we have seen is that from the what you might call the libertarian wing of football fandom, which tends to involve about two people. But all of a sudden, the libertarians have decided that they are interested in soccer ball and are chipping in. This is an absolute disgrace. The Premier League's been a success, and you shouldn't have people fans getting involved in setting ticket prices, or the regulator. Well, the regulator's remit specifically states it does not dictate ticket prices, and also that fans do not have a veto. All that it's saying is that fans should be involved as part of the decision-making process, but ultimately it's down to the individual boards of directors. Now, we'll be coming back to ticket prices further on in the podcast. So we've already seen scaremongering coming out, and that scaremongering, in my view, is being driven by the Premier League itself. Um, the other issue is that the backstop ruling, in terms of which, and the Premier League isn't asked about issues to do with the colour of the club shirt or the badge. It's not particularly bothered about moving stadiums either. The Premier League's objection to the regulator is all to do with the distribution of money. And what we are seeing in relation to this, previously, the backstop powers of the regulator were along the lines of the Premier League puts forwards a proposal, the EFL puts forwards a proposal, and the regulator had to choose the best of the two. Under the new rules, what the regulator can say is that they're both bobbins. They're both ludicrous and unrealistic, and therefore the regulator now has the power to independently come up with a distribution deal, which, if I was the regulator, I would hope that that particular stage is not reached. So I think that, but it is a positive step. And the state of the game report, the state of the financial game report, and I'm not throwing my hat into this ring. I've written two of those for the government, along with my very good friend Christina Philippou from Portsmouth. There's got to be one of those within 18 months of the regulator being appointed, and it was going to be on a quite a regular basis after that. But now they're saying it's just one every 5 years, which is good news for my marriage.
um, I couldn't find the mute button there, Kieran, because it's underneath my script. So you may have heard me trying to sneeze quietly
Yes.
in the background there. As Ali pointed out, me trying to sneeze quietly sounds like Donald Duck sneezing in a cartoon. As you say, Kieran, I don't think anyone believes that the Premier League or the Labour Party, the government, will appoint a patsy. But is there not a danger? A friend of mine, the only truly wealthy person I know, he's a knight of the realm. If there is such a thing as the Illuminati, he will be part of it. But
Right.
he's now head of English National Ballet. In the past, he's been head of Historic Royal Palaces. He's been head of the Honours Committee. He cheerfully admits that it's like being a Premier League manager, that you spend 3 years as a head of a quango and then you get moved on to another quango. Is there not a danger that might happen, that you might get a career sort of quango chair who's has a regulatory background but not necessarily in football?
Um, that could be one consideration. I think they are very much looking for somebody who does have a good grasp of the numbers, and it's a relatively rarefied group of people, I think, who could satisfy the criteria for the job. Also, it is going to have to be somebody with, for want of a better phrase, a social conscience, because I know how much partners in big accounting firms earn, and I know how much investment bankers earn as far in the world of finance. And you're adding on an extra zero to the salary that they're getting compared to what's on offer. So it's somebody that has an enthusiasm, who perhaps is at that stage in their career where they are effectively saying, right, I've done my time in finance, I've done my time in banking, I'm looking for want of a better phrase, a Quango based role, because I want to have a legacy in terms of doing good for a particular industry, and this industry just happens to be the football industry.
And do you think there are plenty of people who want this job?
I think there will be plenty of applications. Yes, I think there'll be some from people that are wholly unqualified, and that will be filtered out. Yes, I think we will be pleasantly surprised by the regulatory appointment.
Okay, I might apply after all. You mentioned the Premier League only being concerned with the options for financial distribution to the EFL, and it seems, Kieran, almost completely under the radar that there has been a breakthrough on that situation this week.
Well, yeah, this is something which I think Mark Kleinman at Sky reported, and Mark's a very good business reporter, and there's articles from some journalists you read where you think, well, there's an awful lot of conjecture and relatively little substance, and Mark is not one of those people. So it appears to be the case that there's going to be at the next Premier League executive meeting, the Premier League is finally going to sit down with its members and say, we need to have a proposal to the EFL so that the backstop powers of the regulator are not something which we have to deal with. And the Premier League, if it's got any sense, and this is where I think the Premier League has scored a spectacular own goal. If the Premier League had come together and put forward to the EFL a reasonable offer, then the chances are that A, the EFL would have signed off on it, and B, it could be that the Premier League says, perhaps you ought to consider dropping your support for the regulator. We will sign up for 5 years or 10 years. We will give you some form of guarantees with regards to future distribution. And as part of that, we'd like the EFL to reverse its position in favour of the regulator. And it could be that the EFL would go away and reflect and say, yes, we feel we've got a degree of security in this deal for our members going forwards for a very long time. And then you'd have this rather crazy situation. The Premier League, the EFL, and the National League would all be in opposition to the regulator, and the Football Association appears to be sort of away with the fairies in terms of having a strong feeling for it. I think it's broadly come down and says, yeah, we're okay with it. We haven't got huge objections as long as it doesn't cost us any jobs. And that's another issue that, yeah, there's genuine fear at the Premier League that the creation of the regulator could mean job redundancies at some of the existing regulatory bodies. There's self-interest in all decisions which are being made. But it does now appear that the Premier League is starting to make some progress in terms of formulating an offer to the EFL. And if that is accepted, then the regulator doesn't get involved, because the regulator can only be triggered if one of the Premier League or the EFL effectively pushes the emergency button, and then the system cranks into gear.
See, we assume, Kieran, that the EFL are responsible and sensible people in these negotiations because we have a relationship with the EFL. We can only speculate about the Premier League because we have no relationship with them whatsoever. But you kind of guess that they probably, when they get together in a room, they are as responsible and sensible people. Really, it's just they seem so reluctant to do that. And hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, because Mark Ives, the head of the National League, is coming on, we'll find out how responsible and sensible they are. So we're starting to square the circle, Kieran. We're starting to, we're almost the Henry Kissinger of this situation, without the lying duplicity. We haven't, to the best of my knowledge, Kieran, ever mentioned the Libyan FA on this podcast. So this is a first, but it's not a good story, unfortunately.
It's not a good story. Libya were hosting Nigeria in an AFCON qualifier, and when the Nigerian plane was flying into Libya, its its destination airport was changed. The flight was diverted, and the Nigerian players and administrators ended up in an airport with no food, no drink, and no phone connection. One of the Nigerian players thought that they'd arrived in Luton. It was that bad. Thank you. I'm available. I'm available. Um, so Nigeria said, look, our players have not been able to properly prepare for the game. And as a consequence, they refused to play. So what's happened here is that the African Football Federation Confederation has reviewed the case. It has fined the Libyan Football Association $50,000, and it has awarded Nigeria a 3-0 victory in the match, which is going to significantly enhance Nigeria's opportunities to qualify for the finals of the competition and diminish those of Libya. But it does appear to be quite Machiavellian behaviour on behalf of the Libyan FA here.
Yeah, it would be interesting to try and get more detail because normally it's the country that or the club that refuses to play that would get the punishment. But so clearly, the African authorities have looked into this and deemed Libya's behaviour. You do wonder why they would. Was it circumstance or was this a deliberate attempt to unsettle their opponents before a game? This is what, yeah. We'll see if we can get some more details on that, Kieran, and come back to ours. But talking of fines and in the millions, Paris Saint-Germain are in a bit of trouble.
Yes, this is to do with the boy Mbappe and his ultimate move to Real Madrid. I don't know whether you saw the highlights from El Clasico this weekend, but he had quite a few one-on-ones,
He did.
to put it mildly.
He was offside a lot, wasn't
Yes. So what happened was Kylian Mbappe had a contract at Paris Saint-Germain. He signed an extension to the contract, and the extension, I think it was a 2-year extension to the contract plus an option for 1 year. So he signed this in 2022. This meant that he was committed to play with PSG until 2024. I think the first thing that ground his gears was he went out onto the pitch with the obligatory photograph for the obligatory photograph session, only to find that he was presented with a shirt with the number 2025 on. He was going, hold on, I've got an option to 2025. I'm only contractually obliged to 2024. Yeah, I don't like this type of mind games. And then 12 months later, so we got here now to the summer of 2023, so he's entering into the final 12 months of his contract. The relationship started to deteriorate because he wasn't prepared to sign a further extension, and the PSG therefore made him stay at home for the pre-season tour. I think they dropped him for the first couple of games of the most recent season, and they thrashed out some sort of deal. Now, according to PSG, Kylian Mbappe, as part of him feeling loyalty towards PSG, he relinquished the final 1/3 of his bonus, and he also relinquished 3 months of his salary, which together came to 55 million euros, which is a spectacular sum, but elite athlete. He subsequently, of course, has gone to Real Madrid, and he's saying, "I want that 55 million euros." Now, as somebody that has very, very briefly taught contract law, a verbal contract is still a contract, but it's an absolute bugger in terms of being able to prove that it existed. So PSG are saying, well, there was a verbal deal between the club and the player, and Mbappe's representatives are saying, well, yeah, if there had been a deal, we'd have signed off for it on a piece of paper because that's evidence. That's evidence which is greater proof. There's only your claim that this was a verbal agreement between the two parties. So the French authorities have come down in favour of Mbappe. I think PSG are trying to take this further to avoid paying him the 55 million, but he does appear to be in a very strong position at present.
Usually on this pod, Kieran, when we use the phrase "it beggars belief," it's about Barcelona. But it genuinely beggars belief that PSG, one of the biggest clubs in Europe and possibly in the world, Kylian Mbappe, one of the highest profile players in Europe and possibly the world, did a deal verbally that involves 55 million euros. Now, that either implies that the sum involved, they're at such a rarefied level that sum means nothing to them, or it means that someone in both camps is an idiot. Well, you don't just, it's not the sort of thing every now and again you'll be in the toilet at the Parson's Arms and you'll say, anyone got a ticket for next week? I go, yeah. Even then, you'll get them to sign it on the back of a fag packet. You won't just take their word. It's very difficult to comprehend that this could happen, Kieran, isn't it?
It's yes, on the scale of incredulity, whatever it's called. Yes, I think if we had Jimmy Hill in the room, he would be stroking his chin and looking quizzical.
He would, and then somebody would turn around to Jimmy and say, "It's your fault. You had the minimum wage."
That's right. Yes.
Now it seems odd, Kieran, on a pod where we started talking about how much money Man United have spent on sacking managers in the past few years. It seems odd to be talking about rather bizarre cost-cutting things that they've put into place this week. But this is a rather bizarre cost-cutting attempt for Manchester United.
That's right. So we are recording this on Tuesday night, and on Monday, the FIFA Player Awards, the Ballon d'Or, UEFA Player Awards, were taking place. Now, Manchester City had 8 nominees from both the men's and the women's team at the awards ceremony. So therefore, Manchester City decided to charter a flight to the awards ceremony. I think it was in Monaco. We've established that geography is not our strongest suit as far as this show is concerned.
And the reason why Monaco, which is the capital of Mexico, or why they had it there, I really don't know. Yeah.
So the ceremony was taking place on the Monday night. Manchester City are playing on the Wednesday, so therefore, private jet gets the players in, sits around, picks up an award or doesn't pick an award, and also congratulations to Rodri.
Yeah.
And as for the reaction of Real Madrid,
oh my God,
I don't know what Spanish is for bottom lip, but that was the biggest bottom lip I've ever seen in the history of football. Deary me, how shameful a response.
What was their,
Rodri's been magnificent.
What was their quote? We don't go where we don't get respect. Which is, it's like the closing lines of an EastEnders episode. You half expect a doof, doof, doof. It's pathetic.
Absolutely.
Because basically they thought Vinicius Junior should have won the award, but wasn't even nominated, I believe, so decided that they weren't going full stop. Yeah.
Ridiculous. And he will win it at one stage. Fantastic player. And so on. But Manchester United, who only had 2 nominees, by all accounts, said to Manchester United, any room in the boot or something like that. Can we hop on the plane with you? To which Manchester City said, sorry, it's full. But this does seem rather, and some of the things which have, I've read, I think in the Athletic and other places, some of the things that Manchester United have been coming out with. Oh, we're concerned about our carbon footprint. I'm going, well, hold on. Going back to the Ten Hag story, during the summer when Ten Hag was on holiday in Spain or Portugal, wherever it was, Manchester United flew 3 members of staff in 3 separate private jets from 3 different airports. So if they're concerned about their carbon footprint now, and again, to me, it's indicative of the culture of Ineos that they're prepared to do anything for executives. And even now they're treating players as second-class citizens compared to the way that they'll treat the execs. So they've had to find their own way there and their own way back. This is Manchester United. This is to be sort of doing things like this. And I'm sure, I don't know how this story was leaked, but I'm sure it was leaked gleefully by Manchester City in terms of the way that Manchester United are now behaving.
It is rather a pleasing image, though, isn't it, Kieran? The 2 Man United nominees in the EasyJet queue,
yes,
looking jealously. Also, it must be quite galling for Man United fans to see Scott McTominay, a player who was in and out of the United team and United squad and got a lot of criticism absolutely tearing it up for Napoli at the moment, along with your old boy Billy Gilmore, both doing a fantastic job out there.
Yes, yeah, hugely underrated player. Isn't this once again a classic example of homegrown player um, doesn't get the appreciation at the club? Because plenty of fans thought he was a, he was a should. But going back to football finance, he was pure profit in terms of a sale, and that was one thing which counted in the willingness of the club to allow him to go.
Now, this next story, Kieran, involving West Ham and their stadium, was something that we took a fair bit of interest in right at the start. But then West Ham fans decided they had other issues with their ownership to moan about. So it kind of slipped away a little bit. And to be honest, I'd forgotten all about it, but it's resolved.
It's resolved in a very strange way, and to be fair here, West Ham have been trying to act on behalf of their fans. When the London Stadium agreement was signed between the football club and the landlord, the LLDC, London Legacy Development Corporation, there was, and I quote, a London comparable club clause in relation to catering, which said that whoever the caterers were at the London Stadium, which here is an organisation called Delaware North, they could not charge more than the average price charged by Spurs, Arsenal, and Chelsea. Now, West Ham fans, and you've got to give West Ham fans credit here because they've gone and done the donkey work, and they've then passed it on to the club because the club's not actually got an incentive to investigate this. They found out that last season the average price of a pint for those three clubs, and you have to excuse my ignorance here, I don't know how much a pint is supposed to cost, was £5.75 for Spurs, Arsenal, and Chelsea, and West Ham were charging £6.50. So therefore, they were effectively, as far as the fans were concerned, in breach of this agreement. Now, the reason why this has been resolved is that West Ham have dropped the price of a pint by 2p to £6.48. I don't know anybody that carries round 1 and 2p coins. I cannot recall the last time I saw a 1 or 2p coin, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's been dropped by 2p to £6.48. But the other three clubs have all substantially increased their prices. So their average price is now £6.53. So yes, the issue has been resolved, but not from the perspective of West Ham fans feeling that they've got any particularly better off. It's just that the fans at the other clubs are now worse off. I think Arsenal are now charging £6.85, whereas it was substantially lower last season.
God bless you, Kieran. You don't drink, so there's no reason for you to know that it's been some time since any bar in the Premier League has taken cash. There'd be a lot of huffing and puffing at every bar if the queues are long enough at Premier League bars as it is, without some numpty counting out his 2p coins to get his £6.48, which again, it makes a nonsense of the whole thing because everyone's just putting their card across and getting their beer as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of Pyrrhic victory in a way, isn't it? I know those to be those. You say you don't know how much a pint costs. Those pint prices are a little bit cheaper than you'd pay in a pub in central London, so they're not exorbitant. A little bit, yeah. They're not exorbitant. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about I don't know how they're managing to artificially deflate the prices in the Portsmouth Arms, Kieran, although they're probably aware that most of the people in there would look askance at paying north of a fiver. But certainly in the ground, it's not the cost of the drinking seller's part that's annoying. It's the time it takes you to get it. Here's a strange one, Kieran. Here's a story about Ken Bates as the innocent victim.
Yes. This is a case brought by Ken Bates for character assassination, a libel case, and there was a an assessment of Ken Bates by a journalist, which, to be fair, didn't appear in a football magazine, but it certainly did cover Ken Bates' period of ownership of Chelsea. And we say things about owners, which are critical. But I think the very fact that we've not been sued on the show is because we tend to stick to facts.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the sort of
yeah,
the
yeah.
and if we don't stick to facts, we say we're not cynics, which I think is the new allegedly as
Yeah,
our get
yeah.
out clause is concerned. And I suspect we'll be getting dim looks from our legal listeners. But I think one of the accusations was that Ken Bates tried to have some rivals of his murdered. Now, I'm not Ken Bates' biggest fan, but I've always given him credit for Chelsea pitch owners, and I always felt that he put the interests of Ken Bates first and foremost. And there's nothing wrong with that if you are an owner of a business. Yeah, that's the nature of business. Um, the defence put forward by the journalist, and I do quite like this, is Ken Bates has got such a bad reputation already. How can he possibly be defamed? Which is an intriguing one.
Yeah.
Well, accusing somebody of having their rivals murdered is one way, and there were sort of bringing it back into the realm of football finance. There were some accusations about his time at Chelsea, which were completely unfounded and not based on fact. And as a consequence, Ken Bates was awarded £150,000 in damages. Um, and I think this does go to show for people who also put things up on the internet. You just be a little bit careful and a little bit cautious. Just if you don't like somebody, well, that's what WhatsApp's for, not public forum.
Yeah, there's always that moment in any pub conversation. You're quite happy for a while. You go along with the conspiracy theories when a bloke in a pub you hardly know is telling you about a club owner and he did this and he did that. And you go, oh, that's terrible. And then he says, yeah, of course, he had 3 people killed. And you go, what? I'm willing to believe a lot of things about Simon Jordan, but even I would go, no, he didn't. It'd be very hard for Simon Jordan to sneak up on anybody anyway with the amount of aftershave he wears. So it'd be impossible. We we mentioned our penultimate story, Kieran, takes us back to a story you mentioned earlier, the Classico at the weekend, and Barcelona's shirt that they wore in that incredible victory against
Yes,
Real Madrid.
yes. I mean, and it was a magnificent game of football, has to be said.
Yeah.
Um, Barcelona have a shirt sponsorship deal with Spotify, and under the terms of the deal, on I think it's one occasion a year, rather than wear the Spotify logo, Barcelona will have a kit with a name of a band. I think they've had the Stones on in the past. Um, this year, in order to enhance the credentials of Barcelona of being more than just a club, they had Coldplay on the front of their shirts as a one-off. But there were only 1,899 kits made with the Coldplay logo. So creating artificial scarcity. And on the back of that, Barcelona were charging €399 for a shirt. Now they were saying, well, hold on, all of the net proceeds were going to UNHCR. And I'm thinking, well, hold on, you're Barcelona. Why can't the gross proceeds be going? Because whenever I see phrases like net proceeds, I do get quite twitchy because I'm fully aware of how people can slice and dice gross numbers. But yeah, an incredible fee to charge for a shirt, which we know from having spoken to our secret kit manufacturer would probably have cost no more than 12 or €13 to make.
How much do you reckon Barcelona would make if they had the Cure sponsoring their shirt, Kieran?
Well, I'd buy it.
Oh, you'd buy it, obviously. But yeah, well, you'd buy 3 or 4, I imagine.
Yes, yeah.
I can imagine Ipswich going, hang on a second, this is our idea. putting
Yes.
patterns. It's a strange one, Kieran, because what was it, 10 years ago, less, when one of the things that Barcelona was so adamant about was the integrity of their front of shirt, that they simply wouldn't have, that there was no sponsor big enough, strong enough to be on the front of Barcelona's shirt. And then they went for UNICEF, I believe, did they not, for their
Yeah,
first
yeah, yeah.
front of shirt sponsor? And people all over the world went, well, there's a club with integrity. And now they're basically whoring the front of the shirt out to anybody, the highest bidder, aren't they, for each game?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, there will be some money going towards a charity on the back of this. But €399 does seem ridiculous. Yeah. Now, those people that have bought one, they say, well, yeah, it's a memento of the 4-0 victory against Real Madrid. But if they'd been turned over 4-0 by Real Madrid, I suspect it wouldn't have had quite the luster or um, affection amongst the Barcelona fan base.
But it's the Barcelona shirt. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I'm a Palace fan. I hate the current sponsor that we have,
Mm.
right? And most Palace fans do. Fans love their kit. This is Barcelona. They shouldn't just be going, anybody who wants to sponsor the front of our shirt can do so if they pay enough money. And by the way, we'll bung 10% off it to a charity. It's just it's a strange thing for a club that for most of our lifetime stood for something, stood for Catalonia, it stood for various political leanings, and now it seems to be a club that stands for nothing at all.
Blinded by the check.
There you go.
It comes back to what we've sadly. Let's face it. If it had not been for people being blinded for the check, this podcast would have run out of air and content within 2 or 3 weeks.
I take it all back. God bless Barcelona. I love what a club. Now, our last story, Kieran. I feel I owe the FSA, the Football Supporters Association, an apology here to an extent, because I did mention this in passing in a kind of rant on the Wednesday, Tuesday's pod. What day of the week is it? Yeah, Tuesday's pod, the questions pod, when we had the question from the Fulham fan about match day ticket prices. And I mentioned the FSA Stop Exploiting Loyalty campaign, and with a semi-flippant remark about the fact that it's not the loyal fans that are being exploited at the moment. It's the one-off overseas fans. But we should have given more time. I apologise. We should have devoted more time to the campaign that began on Saturday by the FSA.
Yes, and I mean, I think the FSA is acting as the umbrella organisation for this. But what we are seeing is fan groups coming together. So at the Prince Albert pub in Brighton on Saturday, Brighton fans and Wolves fans, they had to stop exporting loyalty, and that's the accusation which is made. And first of all, it's not every club in the Premier League, because, as you know, at Palace, they've frozen season ticket prices this year. I've got to say, speaking to my mates at Brighton, the consensus is that our ticket prices are fairly priced. I suspect that's also connected to the fact that clubs like ours and also the likes of Brentford are owned by fans, and therefore Steve Parish and Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham, they do have closer links now with the understanding of what it's like to be a fan than the private equity funds, hedge funds, and owners who see football as an extension of the entertainment industry, and therefore you charge what the market will bear. And as you know, any opportunity to crowbar a reference Robert Smith and the Cure into the price of podcast, he's eagerly seized upon by my good self. But there's an absolutely fantastic interview with Robert Smith up on YouTube where he's said the tickets for the gigs, which are I've desperately tried to get hold of one for this week. He says we're not going to charge what we could have charged because we don't think it's right. We earn enough money as it is. We don't want to go down the dynamic pricing route that we saw with Oasis. And he says we've been going for 40 years, and part of the reason why we've been going for 40 years is that we've built up goodwill with our fan base. We will sell our T-shirts cheap. And the reason for that is that now we've got fans who can afford to buy a ticket and a T-shirt. And they might buy two T-shirts, but they'll also have a couple of drinks, and they'll enjoy the gig even more. Um, and they'll come back the next time we tour. And therefore, that's part of the relationship between the artist and the fan. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And those football clubs that do go down that route are storing up goodwill. Those clubs who are going down the route that we are seeing at clubs such as Spurs and West Ham, um, when results start to turn wrong, the goodwill um, egg timer is that much more empty to begin with, and the tolerance of fan bases who feel that their love and affection and loyalty towards the club is triggered in terms of dissent towards the ownership that much more quicker. Um, so apologies for the way I English there. So that's where we are at present. So there is an increasing number of fan groups who are talking to one another. And yes, it is at present, it's just banners. But I think as this will continue over the course of the season, um, the action taken by fans might turn into perhaps something similar to what we've seen at places such as Charlton, where everybody brings tennis balls and starts lobbing them on the pitch or whatever, and that's not going to look very good for the cameras of Sky, because especially those matches are being broadcast all over the world. It's not going to look very good for the Premier League. So if you want to ignore fans, Premier League clubs, that is your choice. It is the choice of owners, but remember, it was the fans whose actions resulted in Super League collapsing. It was the fans that you realised who were not at the stadiums during COVID, just how important those fans were. And you don't need to rinse them for the ultimate prices that some of you are now charging.
Pausing only to say, Kieran, that if there is a boozer in Brighton called the Prince Albert, I dread to think what the pub sign is. Uh, would you agree? It seems to me at the moment, and we talked about UEFA taking steps on this recently. It seems to me that away fans are being considered more than home fans. It seems to me there's more of a consensus that away fans are paying too much for games at the moment rather than home fans. Do you think that's fair?
um, I mean, you've got to give the FSA a huge amount of credit, and the FSA's equivalent in Europe, again, a lot of credit for putting together an articulate, eloquent, and reasoned argument uh, that having a system in which prices charged for away tickets were capped at, in the case of the Premier League, £30, which I think we as fans think is a reasonable price, and it has been, that cap has kept for a long period. I think West Brom were charging 47, or were being charged 47 last weekend, which seems to be completely disproportionate for second tier football. Um, that those organisations deserve a lot of credit because they have managed to convince the authorities that having a full away section in a Premier League match actually enhances the TV product, which ultimately is the biggest revenue source of the Premier League. And therefore, they're not discounted prices, they are fair prices. You know, Brighton are playing at Liverpool on Saturday. That's going to involve a rail fare of 70 or 80 quid, catering, car parking, the usual. And to have £30 as a ticket is adding to the cost, but is accepted by fans as, look, we're watching Premier League football, we're willing to pay it. So that is a positive. Home fans, especially day fans, are being charged increasingly alarming prices.
Yeah, it's the anniversary of my dear old dad's passing this week, and I can hear him now saying for 30 quid he'd want 2 weeks in Mallorca, not a ticket to see West Brom away. It's the last time he ever put. I bought him his ticket ever since. We turned up the start of one season; it had gone up to a fiver. he wouldn't pay it. He went home. So that's how times have changed. Thank you to everyone who's donated to Pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. Now, the more eagle-eared of you will be thinking, hang on a second, Kevin, you said last time that would be the final time you ever said that. You had a big announcement for us. We do have a big announcement, but producer guy gave me a mild slap across the wrist because I was premature in saying that we'd be able to be in a situation to tell you the exciting news this week, because we still have some I's to dot and some T's to cross, but there is some very exciting news about how you can get involved with the pod in future, much more involved, with much more access to us and many more benefits, and that news is coming up. If you have a question you'd like answered on our regular Tuesday pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X and find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, which has just come out in paperback, you could go to a bookshop or you could go to our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday, the other side of the weekend, with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
As always, thank you to everybody who is supporting the show via Patreon, and we are conscious that we want to offer the subscriber base something different, something better. So that's why we will have announcements. If you want to come and say hello in person to us, we are appearing at the Brighton Utilitarian Church on Friday, the 15th of November. As part of our commitment to Movember, and we are all of the funds, or all of the funds raised on the gig will be going to Brighton Samaritans, who do an amazing job there, and also I am saying farewell to my most emotional of possessions, Paul McShane's winning shirt signed. Vini Vidi Vidi Vici as well. We came, we saw, we conquered. Which for an Irish international football, it's probably not used to that. But he's probably been to Latin mass, hasn't he?
Of course,
as a young man.
Yeah. How much would that shirt be worth, Kieran, if I were to accidentally say knock half a pint of Guinness over it just before it went on sale? Accidentally, you know.
It's mounted, it's framed, it's certificated, it's full works. So it does look rather spectacular, but I feel I just like to make a contribution myself to the amazing work that Samaritans do.
Who's doing the auction? Who's doing the auction, by the way?
It's a written bids.
Oh, okay,
so,
right, okay.
I will put a link up on Twitter. If anybody wants to consider it, it is a part of history.
That's right. Yeah,
it's the only time that we wore a white away shirt.
Yeah.
That season.
Yeah, it's probably best you do written bids, because if I'll be on the first, me and Brighton, I want to be on the first train out of there, Kieran. The very first bid that came up, 15p, it's yours, mate. Off you go.
And thank you very much for everybody. If they want to come along, tickets are available. If you go to Eventbrite, and again, we'll be putting up links for those. And if not, we will see you back on Tuesday.
Yeah, and we're still aiming for a very special guest in Brighton as well, so we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.